Happy Sabbath again, Sunnyvale. I do hope you know that those are not just words, but really in God's house, there's always a place for us, and that we are indeed chosen, not forsaken. I couldn't think of a more appropriate song before going into this sermonic topic. So I want to say thank you, as always, to our music department and to each person behind the scenes who makes this service run how it does and makes this church the place that it is. You sometimes only see a couple of us up front, but there are so many people here during the week, early in the morning on Sabbath, to make sure that we have a good experience. So to each of you, we do say thank you. Pastor Rob and Pastor Sandy send their greetings. They are away this week. Once again, they are at the point in their vacation time where it's use it or lose it. And so sometimes they say, if you don't come apart, then you'll fall apart. So they are enjoying their time in Tahoe, but they are tuning in, watching us, and staying connected. But they do send their greetings. They'll be away next week as well, because there's one more meeting. Next week, they'll be away for work as far as our union constituency session. But they will be back shortly there, actually, not shortly after, right after that. So please keep them in your prayers. They're keeping us in theirs. And we look forward to seeing them back very soon. As you know, we came off of a fairly extended series last week, looking at the moment and looking at different miracles of Jesus. And before that, over at the top of the year, we had an extended series on Romans chapter 8. And so now we're starting a new series today entitled The Point of It All, looking at what is the crux, what is the message of this parable, of the parables. We'll be in it for a couple of weeks. We might take a break here or there, so depending on what the calendar calls for. But for the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking just at parables, looking at God's radical love for us, and looking at how this might end up turning us on our heads and how we can be more kingdom-minded and aligned with God's kingdom. So as I always do, I will solicit your prayers and your amens, and we will be on our way. So if you would, please bow your heads. Our Father and our God, we're so grateful for this day. It's humbling always to be tasked to speak in front of any group. And I'm asking God now that awe would never go away, and that while we can have fun and while we can see you in a new and refreshing way, that everybody from the person up here to each person up here would take this moment seriously, so that we can hear from you in a way that we might not have heard before, and that we can be challenged and convicted, but most of all encouraged by what you have for us. So God, I'm asking that you will govern my thoughts, that they'll be trained on you, that you will guide my words, that they will be clear, and that most of all, you will govern my heart, or guard my heart, so that there will be no duplicity, saying one thing but living or doing another. So we thank you in advance what you're going to do in this place. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. So our series is The Point of It All. But our title today is Jesus and Them. The text says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.' So he told them this parable." As we know, people often will use a story or an illustration to explain something or to explain a point, whether it's parents to their children, teachers to their students, sometimes a preacher, pastor, or presenter to the individuals listening in the audience. Stories have a way of sometimes making some points fairly plain. As you are, I'm sure, aware, there are more than 30 parables recorded in the Gospels. And Jesus used these to illustrate his points of many of his messages. And in some instances, the parable itself was the message. Jesus would toss some common experience alongside a spiritual reality in order to reveal truth to believers and to conceal truth from unbelievers. Now, before we get too far into today's topic, I must admit I do often find it problematic to preach parables or when people preach them. Because I think sometimes when I've heard them presented, and even sometimes my own temptation, is to mix up a parable with an allegory or with a fable. Fables, as you know, are fictional. And fables are, they share with us a point, but they are for sure fictional. We know that when it comes to fables. When it comes to allegories, there is a one-to-one meaning with each thing in the story, whether it represents a political thought, a person, or a way of life, but those are with allegories. With parables, though, I would say that the best definition that I've seen of a parable is that there's one major point. Now, there are always many applications, but there's one major spiritual point when it comes to a parable. I think sometimes we run into issues when we try to make a parable an allegory, and we say, well, this is that, and that's this, and it's like, wait, no, now it's going to fall apart pretty quickly. It might work for some, but typically, once you go so far down that road, it ends up falling apart. So in my own struggle, it is a little bit harder sometimes to resist those temptations to try to find something in everything, and also to make sure, okay, well, what is the actual point of the parable? Hence, the point of it all, as our series as far as coming up. So why do we study parables if they are this problematic? I would say that parables are the most prevalent form of Jesus' teaching that we have. He has, like I said, there are over 30 that are recorded in the 4 Gospels. Parables, I would say, are actually easy to remember. If I were to ask right now, hey, somebody give me a couple of the Beatitudes, I'm sure that we could. Do we even know how many Beatitudes there are? But if I were to say, hey, someone tell me a parable, or someone call off some parables, we could do that fairly quickly. We would know them right away. So parables to me, and to us, they're quite memorable. So I think that there's value in studying them. And parables, ultimately, they are meant to do something to us or for us, which is to align us with God's kingdom. So there is value, even when parables seem to be problematic. I remember one time, actually, when we were talking about this series, and then Jim Wilson was like, oh, I can't wait till you guys get to the rich man and Lazarus and how you guys worked that one out. And which is a very, very problematic parable if you don't know what the point is, or if you sit here and try to make it an allegory. But like I said, there's lots of value when it comes to the New Testament parables of Jesus. So getting into our story for today, and I want to be careful right now because I don't want you to accuse me of something I'm not doing. I would say that we often give the Pharisees a bad rap in the Bible, or I would say they're at least misunderstood. For just a little bit of context, and I don't want to ever be in the habit of defending Pharisees. Like if I say they're trouble people, that makes me sound pharisaical, so they're not who I would want to be. But just for some context, when it comes to the Pharisees, if you remember Israel's cycle of falling and failing, like imagine time and time again, from as far back as you can remember, we as a people just can't get it right. And so you now find yourself under Roman oppression, and you're like, okay, and your thinking is, if we can, we're being judged by God, but if everybody in the nation can just one day can just go without sinning, it all ends. If we can just keep one Sabbath day, all of us, then this all comes to a stop. That was their thinking. And so I'm not defending them, but I do kind of understand a little bit if you're thinking, oh, wow, well, you just sat there and you did that, so here we go, here's yet another day. So you're trying to get everybody just for one day to, quote, unquote, do the right thing. Not defending them, just somewhat trying to understand them. So they, on a national level, they want what's best for their nation, for their country. We can relate to that, right? I think we all want what's best for our country. Spiritually, they want what's best for their group, for their church. I think we can relate to that, right? So the Pharisees, not our favorite people, but we can kind of understand some things about them when you really get their mindset. So the text says, now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him being Jesus. Jesus is mixing it up with all kinds of people. In this case, tax collectors and sinners. One verse says notorious sinners. You remember that the tax collectors were those who collected money from their own people, as far as the Jews, and they gave it to the Roman government. So not only are you taking money from people who don't have it, but you're giving it to the people who are oppressing us. And of course now, to make a living, Rome said, we don't care what you take for yourself. As long as we get our due, you can sit here and take whatever you want. You can sit here and be as honest or dishonest as you please. So tax collectors aren't looked upon very highly. But then you also have sinners, which of course, it's like, wait, once again, now as you're doing this, we're now all stuck in this situation. That's their belief. So what is the significance of eating? Because they're saying, now all the tax collectors and other notorious sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. Eating, as you know, is a fairly intimate thing. You don't typically grab lunch with somebody you hate. If I think about the sandwiches I had this past week, or the macaroni I had earlier this summer, whatever else, it's always with people whose company I enjoyed. It's very rare that you're going to sit here and say, hey, let's go grab dinner, and you don't really care for the person. So these Pharisees, they can't wrap their minds around why Jesus would hang out with them, with people who put our nation at risk, people who put our standing with God at risk. If you are who you say you are, why are you hanging out with them? And I think that we sometimes can be more relatable to Pharisees than we know, because we sometimes have a them mentality when it comes to people who think differently than we do, maybe somewhere on the political spectrum. How in the world could you vote like that? How could you support this person? And that goes on both sides. How could you support this movement? How could you have gotten caught up in that, a them mentality? In the church, when it comes to, wait, this is the issue? We haven't resolved this yet? This is really how you read the Bible. Wanting to protect our church, saying, eventually this is going to cause a split. Just get in line, or just get it together. We can sometimes look at people as far as them, or being like, okay, then they're not a part of our crew or our group, or they don't want what's best for us. Maybe it's on a personal level, somebody who might have mistreated you, somebody who might not have our best interest at heart. And we look at it like as far as them over there, I don't really want to mess with that, or maybe it's something social. But sometimes we can be more like Pharisees than we know, as far as drawing a line in the sand, saying we, who know better, who are doing it okay, want what's best for this thing, versus them, who are just causing some kind of chaos, or going to bring this whole thing to ruin. Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, this fellow welcomes sinners, and he eats with them. So in response to these accusations, Jesus tells some parables. He starts with a story about a lost sheep. And he talks about, a shepherd who goes into the wilderness. He leaves 99, and he's like, because one's missing, goes, finds it, puts it on his shoulders, and comes back, calls up his friends saying, rejoice with me, because I found my sheep. So that's the first story. So initially, Jesus is like, put yourself in the position of a lowly shepherd. This would have offended his audience. Like, don't have us compare ourselves to those people. No, please don't do that. So looking at the context of this thing, because there are a couple of things you normally want to look at when it comes to a parable. You want to look at why is this being told? What's the context? How did it come about? What did the story grow out of? You want to look at who represents what or where in the story. Like the character identification. And you want to also recognize the what, as far as what's the problem, what thing turns our understanding on its head. So you have context, you have character identification, and you have what makes this thing a challenge or curious. Why, who, and what. So looking at the lost sheep, what's the context? The story occurs in the wilderness. The wilderness is dangerous. Sheep with a shepherd have no business being in the wilderness. But okay, let's look at that. But who or where is God represented? Yes, by the shepherd. It wasn't a trick question. So what's wrong with this parable? What's the issue with it? He, the shepherd, leaves the whole group unattended to go after the one. Sheep shouldn't be in the wilderness. There's no grass there. If he has a whole bunch of friends to help him celebrate, why didn't they help him look for the sheep? If the wilderness is undeveloped, why are they grazing out there? And the story concludes without any mention of the 99. What happened to them? Who's taking care of them? But really, that doesn't matter who's taking care of them, because that's a trick question. The storyteller's taking care of them, I guess. The point of the story is the value of the one. That's the point of it all. So now, just in case they weren't offended by the first parable, Jesus says, let me make sure I really offend you. And let me tell you that sometimes if you're offended by what's said in the pulpit, it's okay. If you sit here and call up somebody else saying, why would Mark say that? Why would Mark go that? I want to let you know, it's not going to bother me. In fact, I might think I'm in good company if I sometimes offend some people. Now, I'm partially joking, but ultimately, Jesus is like, look, I'm going to really offend you now, because not only am I going to compare you to a lowly shepherd, now I'm going to compare you to a lowly woman. The ancient Near East, as you know, is a man's world, and religious leaders like the ones in this text would thank God that they're not a tax collector, I thank God that I'm not a sinner, and I thank God that I'm not a woman. Like, that just would have been a part of their daily prayers. Like, that's just how it was. And so it's in Luke's gospel that we see the revolutionary way that Jesus deals with and treats women, giving them dignity, respect, and love. And the height of it is focused right here in Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10. Because he's saying, put yourself in the position of a woman. A woman loses a coin. She when she recognizes that, she sweeps up she lights a lamp, starts weeping, and then when she finds it, calls up her friends, says, come and celebrate, I found what's lost. So what's the context? Once again, it occurs in the house. A coin is lost at home, and the lady turns the place upside down until she finds it. She has lost a day's wages. What's wrong with the story? It's that the emphasis is on the one that was lost as opposed to the 9 that she had. She probably spends more on the celebration than the coin was worth if you call up all your friends and you're saying, come and celebrate with me. So that could be, odd or weird. Who represents God in this story? The woman, yes. Once again, not your question. You just got to keep up. So now, often people will sometimes, once again, when they start making this more allegorical, it'll be like, okay, well, the shepherd is the son, the woman is the Holy Spirit, and then the father in the next story is it's a reach. Some things fall apart when you continue down that road, but that's what I'm saying, parables, allegories, and fables. So once again, now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, this fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. The religious elite gets complaining, if Jesus really knows God, why is he partying with these sinful people? Why is he hanging out with them? Knowing what they do, knowing what they've done, knowing the damage that they're causing, why is Jesus hanging out with them? I think if you walk around the text, there are just a couple of things we can highlight and some lessons in why Jesus is doing what Jesus does. The first thing is that God sees them, they or whatever else, as having significance. Can somebody say significance? Okay, a shepherd with 99 looks for the one. Next, a lady with 10 coins looks for the one. As you go down the story of the three of them, I'm going to rely on your familiarity with the prodigal son, as well as maybe your commitment to read this chapter later. So we're not going to really touch that one too much. But as you keep on going down, you see that the significance keeps on rising. 1 of 100, 1 of 10, 1 of possibly 2. But you sit there, when the lady loses the coin, she goes into an all-out search, lighting candles in her small home because, back then, the homes had either a small window or no window at all, so it was very dark. It was actually on Sunday night that I was on, it was like 12:30 or 1, and all the power went out in my apartment complex. And I often say that I like nighttime and that I enjoy, the evening. Not that time, because it was dark, couldn't see a thing. Normally, there's some light shining in from the window. It was completely pitch black. So I'm like, if this is what that was like, I'm like, you really have no hope of finding this thing. You're going to have to light a candle or something, because when I tell you it was complete, I checked outside, the whole place is dark. It was like that way for about 2 hours. So I can imagine what this home is like and what people know back then. But she lights a candle, starts sweeping up everything, hoping to come across this coin. And so Jesus raises all these points saying, why, to make us ask, why would she do all this? And the first and most obvious reason is because the coin has spending value. The coin mentioned here is a drachma coin, similar to the Roman denarius, or denarius. So it's about what a laborer would get for 1 day's work. So it's 1 day's wages. So there's use for this coin. This person, these people have use. God can still use them, even when we don't understand what is going on. This was possibly the woman's savings because it was one of 10 drachma coins that she had to live on. And because of its spending value, she went looking urgently for it when it was lost. The coin also has social value because in the ancient Near East, a woman's dignity or her worth was tied to her relationship with a man. And marriage itself didn't always address this or fix this. Sometimes a woman was nothing more than a concubine to her husband. And so a good husband would give his wife a gift in marriage, often 10 coins. And so beyond the spending value, they were a statement to her and to the community about his affection for her and also her authority in the house. So there's something that that person, that them bring to the community. They still have value. There's still a significance that they offer up to the world around them, even though we don't necessarily always understand it. But the coin also would have had sentimental value. Archaeologists have found that often when they have dug up old things from the Near East, that they would find these elaborate headdresses that people would make. And so basically, a woman would take those 10 coins and she would arrange them in a way that so as to like decorate an elaborate headpiece. And so when she would leave the house, it would basically be a way of like showing people, once again, the affection her husband has for her and also the authority that she has. And it's basically the equivalent of a wedding ring. So imagine if you lose that, like just the sentimentality that we have attached to wedding bands or wedding rings. But this value, Jesus is saying, look, I just love them because I just love them. Like, you know what? It might not make sense to you, but they mean a whole lot to me. These people, them, they, whatever, whoever your they are, whoever your them is, they have value. They have significance to God. And so we're not told why exactly, whether it was sentimentality, whether it was spending value, or if it was social value, why the coin was so precious to the woman. But for whatever reason, it is. And she searches diligently until she finds it. Now remember the context of the overall story. The tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen. All it says is that they were coming near to listen, but the accusation is that Jesus welcomes them and eats with them. Jesus then counters with some parables. If you go back to Luke 14 and 13, you'll see why they're saying he eats with them, because there are some other times that he does this. And so Jesus' response starts with the question, which of you, having 100 sheep, doesn't leave 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost? So I'm going to ask you, Sunnyvale, which of you, having 99 sheep, doesn't leave the 99 and go after one that's lost? We often race over the sayings of Jesus just because we're so pious, like, none of us is going to leave 99 to go after the one. Because 99, last I checked, is more valuable than one. And so I'm going to leave the 99 in the wilderness to go after the one. The problem here is that Jesus is like, these people are like, Jesus, what you're saying does not make sense. You're coming out the gate defending yourself with a point that is so invalid that it really is crazy. And so in the second story, there's a bit more sense to be made. Okay, I know that if I set these 9 down, I'm not going to lose anything. There's no real risk to them. I can set them down. They can't walk away. I can go and then search for the one. And so we can kind of get with that a little more. So why does Jesus start with this crazy parable about sheep instead of the one with the coins? And with the coins, what's the point? The first one says he leaves 99 for one. And Jesus doesn't say, let me tell you a story about. He says, which one of you would not do this? So it goes from being something just being discussed to like actually pulling us into making a decision, having to think about what our reaction would be, should be, or could be. So what's the secret? What does Jesus know that the rest of us don't know or that the Pharisees couldn't quite comprehend? Jesus knows the value of one, the secret value of one. And we have to be careful to guard against our own ingrown Phariseeism, I would say, if we look down sometimes on other people who we deem not as worthy of Christ's love. I know Sunnyvale is a grace place, so it wouldn't be sinners. But like I said, somebody else who maybe doesn't quite think how we do, who doesn't quite act how we do, who doesn't quite, vote how we do, or somebody who just mistreats us. But we have to be careful recognizing that God still sees them as significant, even when we don't fully understand it. It doesn't matter how anyone else categorizes them, they are valuable to God. So not only does it teach us that God finds them to have significance, but these parables also present to us God's patience. Can somebody say patience? We have significance and we have patience. In the parable of the missing sheep, the shepherd goes looking until he finds it. He leaves the 99 in the open country and to go look for the one, because the shepherd knows it's easy for sheep to get lost. But it's not necessarily easy for a sheep to find his way home. It is theoretically possible. A sheep could wander away from the flock, keep on eating, searching for food, wander away, and then somehow keep on wandering and wander his or her way back. So it is possible, but it's not very likely. And also a sheep can, it can bleat, it can cry, and the shepherd can hear the bleating sheep and identify its location. But there's no such reality for a lost coin. The lost coin, as you know, is an inanimate object. It doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have any kind of will or emotion. There is nothing the coin can do to get unlost or to save itself. But despite the helplessness, there's still love that's shown, and there's still care that is displayed. Until she finds it is similar language to what is said in verse 4 when talking about the shepherd and the lost sheep, until he finds it. It's the same verb, actually, or it's the same one in Greek, the same tense. But there's a different nuance with the two of them. The shepherd searches with determination. No matter how far the shepherd has to go, he's going to go. But the woman actually searches with diligence. Like, she's like, no matter what I have to do, I'm going to find this thing because it has value. And that's how patient, they are with this thing. One taking a long time, one doing tedious things. There's a certain patience or persistence that is shown with these two displays of searching until what's lost is found. One goes to any length, and one goes to, whatever's required. But the woman doesn't have to go far to find the coin. Why? Because the coin is in the house. One is lost in the wilderness, the other is lost right here at home. The wilderness is a place of uncertainty or a place of danger, a place you might not have provision, but that's not the same as somebody's house. If I have 10 coins in my house on Tuesday morning, and I haven't gone anywhere, no one has come in, and I lose one, I know it's in the house. I know it's right there at home. And so it's a different kind of searching. I remember one time losing my watch, and I remember I was at home when I lost it, and for the life of me, I couldn't find it. I ended up calling up my siblings, calling up my parents, calling up everybody saying, have you seen this? But I started looking silly places. Like, I'm looking in the cabinets. Like, I'm looking literally everywhere that I know. And this is not homiletical license. Like, I'm being dead serious. I'm looking everywhere for my watch. It wasn't a fancy watch, but it was my watch. And somehow, it fell into the couch cushion right on the spring. So it didn't hit the floor. It wasn't right there, so it fell right there. But when I tell you I had to basically do like an FBI search, like, okay, we're going to go from the very bottom of the floor and then just go up, leaving nothing unturned, and just like you're looking for evidence. Like, that's how it went. And so when I found it, I was like, okay, then, this at some point will preach. Now it's today, I guess. So I understand what this woman had to go through to find this little coin. So unlike a sheep, the watch or the coin can't walk out the door. So it's a little bit different than the first. The first story, the sheep wanders away. But in the second story, the woman loses it. The search process is different. The woman turns the house upside down. Like I said, an FBI-type search. The point being that I would say, and like I said, not going too far down the road, but while there's one meaning, there are many applications. In our homes, in our churches, in our sphere of influence, people can get lost all the time. Sometimes by being disillusioned, sometimes when we don't pay attention to them, sometimes if we don't recognize their gifts, or if we don't welcome them. People in the house can be lost. You and I can get lost in the house. I would say the church has to regularly examine itself, and we have to regularly examine ourselves individually to make sure that we as Christians are not the reason that anybody rejects Jesus. And we should be willing to turn the lights on and sweep out everything that causes somebody to create distance between them and Jesus. We should be willing to sit here and turn the lights on and sweep things out of our lives that cause people to be like, nah, I cannot get with Jesus if that's what Jesus is about. There's a difference between being lost and then being lost right here. There are multiple contexts for that. So next to these parables of the sheep and the coin is the parable of the prodigal son, probably next to the Good Samaritan, or to the Samaritan, since we talked about that in the past, the Good Samaritan, the context behind that, is the parable, that one is the most, I guess, well-known. And in this parable, the son chooses to leave, but he has to also choose to come home. And if someone is estranged, or if someone is alienated, or has simply lost their way, they do have to make a decision to come back. That's true. But we also have to be willing to accept them back. I think too often people put emphasis on the fact that the son chose to come back, but he could have come back and the father slammed the door in his face because he's still in his feelings. So I would say the point that I would want to make or highlight from here is that we're not saved by anything that we do for God. We're only saved by what God has done for us. And like coins that can do nothing to help themselves, that's how we are. And here's again Jesus saying that you and I, once God finds us, must be careful that we're not full of ourselves, thinking that we're better than, or more developed than, or further along than, thinking we've arrived, or that we're so much further along than them, or they over there. Because it's easy, like a coin, to have a sudden fall. It's with you one minute, and on that next thing you know, you've lost it, talking about us with ourselves, with our own standing, and it's like, man, how did I do that? I've learned not to look down my nose at anybody else because it's easy to have a fall. I don't care what their position is, how long they've been doing it. I've learned not to be careful to brag about what I've never done because never doesn't have a very long shelf life. At some point, somebody, either you or somebody connected to you or somebody who you love, whatever else, it's going to end up happening. So we see now that they have significance. We see God's patience. And finally, we see that these stories provide reassurance. Can somebody say reassurance? Significance, patience, reassurance. If you've got that, you've got the sermon. You can indeed preach it yourself the next time. When he found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Verse 9, talking about the coin. When she found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost." In the parable of the coins, the value for the one is that it completes the collection. It's not that the one has any more value. They each have value. In the parable of the 10 coins, they are each worth 1/10 of the sum of its part. So they're equal. Because they used to be like, it's easy to think, well, this one has more value. That's not the point. No, they all have value. They have equal value. And often we place emphasis on what was lost. Even in the Bible, it talks about the lost coin, the lost sheep, lost coin. Some say the lost son. Some say the prodigal son. And people talk about lost and found. But each parable, if you look at it, ends with a party. I would say they're really about celebration. Each parable ends with a celebration that is a bit over the top. If you go back and read it, in the first one, the shepherd finds this sheep that's wandered off somewhere, puts the sheep on his shoulders, walks back through the wilderness that's undeveloped, I guess, and then calls up his friends saying, "Let's celebrate, I found my sheep." Doesn't take a nap, doesn't say, let's go get the other 9. Throws a party for this sheep that wandered off. In the next story, the lady, sweeps up everything, and then once she finds it, after turning the house upside down, she ends up throwing a party that might very well cost more than the coin is worth. Over-the-top celebrations. You know how the prodigal son ends, as far as let's kill the fatted calf, let's have some music. It's about to go all night long. Like, it's each parable ends with a celebration that is so far over the top. It's like, is all that really necessary? Like, how can we get happy about that? Or how can we get that happy about that? But when you love something, or when you are in love, you do things that just might not be natural, that just seem over the top sometimes. The tax collectors and sinners came near to Jesus, and the Pharisees and scribes are grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." And he told them this parable: "Which one of you, having 100 sheep in the wilderness, does not leave the 99 and go after it?" What is coming out of this question? When Jesus asks, which one of you would not leave the 99 and go after it, he's asking a question about love. He sees value, like we said before, in the one. And not just that one, but in each one of these 100. The woman sees value in the one, not just that one, but in each one of the 10. It is to an extent about finding that which is lost, but it's more than that. It's about completing the set of 100, completing the set of 10. It's about bringing everything together. No more us and them, we and ours, they and theirs. No, it's bringing everyone together. But it's rooted in a kind of love that does not make sense. What is the problem that the Pharisees and scribes have with Jesus' behavior? It's that they can't comprehend it. Jesus, these are the rules. This is how we live life in this society. But you're breaking all the rules, and you're not doing it that way. This is how we do things. You know who these people are. You know how they're going to mess up our country, mess up our church, or how they messed up our lives individually. Why are you doing this? And we often think of the Pharisees as being mean or accusatory, but remember that the Pharisees were, in their own twisted way, trying to serve God. They were frustrated because Jesus didn't follow the rules like they did. Their words about him were to say, you're not following God the way that we do, and you're following God more so the way that they do, them. You say you're of God, but if you knew God, you wouldn't be doing that, or thinking that, voting that way, going to this church, going here or there. Like, if you are really aligned with God, but Jesus is like, no, you can find me in places that you might not normally suspect, because I show up in all kinds of areas and ways. Jesus is trying to establish a paradigm that says, if you knew the value of these people who are mine, but are lost, or lost being maybe just not like you, then you would do crazy stuff as well. Maybe from the perspective of the woman or of the shepherd, the lost, whether inside or outside, they still belong. And if that's true, then there is no outside. There is no they. There is no them. Why does this matter? Because we can all sit here or wherever we are during this service, as we're watching this, wherever we find ourselves in the moment, inside the comfort of this church or our respective places, feeling sorry for the Pharisees and scribes because they don't get it. But we also don't get it because we have our own rules. We have our own ways of thinking. We have our own philosophy on life, maybe different than theirs, but they're there on how God works. And there's nothing wrong with our understanding of how God works unless our understanding is that that's the only way that God works. And God may be calling out to somebody that you believe is beyond redemption, and God's like, they're mine. God's like, I have value in them. They have use socially. They have use, they bring something to the community. They are so valuable to me that I'm going to sit here and go after them. And Jesus is saying, I believe that they're mine, even though they're lost, or they're not like you, or they're not like me. And they are a part of the set to which you and I belong. And we're incomplete until we bring them in. We are incomplete. Does the lost individual matter, or are the people alone what's important? It's the shepherd's willingness to go after the one and the woman's willingness to go after the one that gives the 99 and also the 9 their real security. If the one is sacrificed in the name of the larger group, then each individual in that group is insecure, knowing that he or she is of little individual value. But when I see the shepherd leaving the 99 for the one, when I see the woman setting down the 9 for the one, it's like, wait, then that means that even if when I become that one, I still have that much value. I'm of that much importance to God, and that's worth celebrating. The humbling factor is that there's no one in the house or in the fold who was not at one time lost or on the outside. And there's no one who has been found who may not one day again be that way. The second time we may be lost inside instead of outside. Either way, we're all in need of being found at some point. And the comfort for me is that no matter how many times I get lost, that there's always a great celebration when I get found. When we don't see the values of others, it's a real tragedy. And as long as a room is devoid of something that you may not like, or something you may not understand, or something that you find challenging, then it's not really a diverse room, and it's not really a room that God is like. Sometimes the things that we dislike the most might be the one thing or the couple of things that we need to have around us all the more, or else we're missing an aspect of what God might be like, or something that God's trying to reveal to us. 99 and 1, 9 and 1. Where is God? Who are the 99 and the 9? The Pharisees. We read this as though God is going after the tax collectors and the sinners. But maybe from where God is sitting, the lost and the Pharisees and the scribes who have lost their ability to recognize God in unexpected places are the ones God's saying, look, I'm searching for you, actually. There's a way to be lost inside, a way to be lost outside. And regardless of where you and I fall, God values us. And so there's something equalizing about this. God's not just going after sinners and tax collectors, but I think God is also saying, Sunnyvale, I'm going after you. Mark, I'm going after you. Person in the sound booth, person watching online, I'm going after you, because you might be lost in a different way as you draw up barriers as far as what you think, how you behave, how you conduct life on whatever scale between yourself and other people. The Pharisees and scribes are grumbling. If Jesus really knows God, why is he partying with these sinful people? And with the parables, Jesus replies, if you really know God, why haven't you joined the party? Jesus and them. It's a lesson on significance, it's a lesson on patience, and it's a lesson on reassurance. That's the point of it all.